All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here talking real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. It's been a little over 4 years since that momentous night at the Barclay Center where Journey and Steve Perry reunited, albeit just for the induction ceremony. As many fans remember, Steve Perry did not perform at the Hall of Fame. He has cited a number of reasons as to why he didn't. Number one, Arnell is in the band and he's not. And number two, according to him, he didn't want to spark all of this talk of reunion, like permanent reunion or expected reunion with his former bandmates. I think there is a fairly easy explanation for why Steve Perry decided to show up. Clearly, he wanted to thank the fans. That was number one. You go back to 1987 when the Journey fan club was just like, okay, what's happening here? Where did Steve go? And that fan club was strung along for years until finally, Bad English got together. And then that was kind of the end of the speculation about Steve returning. Now, granted, that's only a couple of years, but when you're on top of the world and you have an album that is doing well and you had a tour that did really well, then you just walk away from it and all your fans are still out there waiting for another album, which certainly should have been forthcoming. And I think Journey owed the record label another album, and hence you get Trial by Fire later on. So I think Perry wanted to make amends with the fans that I think he left. It's like at the altar. It's the way you look at it with Steve Perry. Another reason is Perry didn't want the night to go off without him getting some kind of credit for what this band did. And he wanted to remind everybody how important he was to everything. No question about it. I don't think he did it to be pompous or arrogant, but without him being there, it wouldn't have been the same ceremony. And quite honestly, it wouldn't make sense. And from what I understand, he was really very reluctant about going. And then he changed his mind right toward the end. Of course, he did put out the caveat that he would not be performing with the band. And it's, again, even to this day, it's disappointing. The third thing he wanted to do indirectly was he wanted to maintain his distance from the other guys. Yes, I know there was a lot of hugging and contact, especially between him and Neil. Not quite so much with the other members, but certainly he and Neil had a pretty decent reunion, or it looked to be that way. Was it all for show? Maybe. I do think that there was some genuine love and appreciation there, but there's more bitterness that continues, because at this stage in everybody's life, why not work together and conquer the world? Just the news of Steve Perry, Neil Schon, Jonathan Cain, and this new rhythm section, which I think is right up Perry's alley, that would make sense for Steve Perry to lay down a couple of vocal tracks and say, hey, what can you guys do with these? And off to the races, But he wanted to maintain distance. That's why he didn't perform. And that's why he has been squashing all kinds of things that Neil Schon would say. Like Neil Schon would say, hey, let's go out for coffee. And Perry probably said that night, yeah, that would be cool. That's what people do. They'll say, yeah, maybe we should do that, but it never happened. He wanted to also prep for his comeback. No question about it that evening was a launching point of interest again in Steve Perry. With him being out of the limelight for so long, there was no better way, there was no better publicity for him than to walk out on that stage and steal the show. And he did. He stole the show. I mean, Journey performed. And by the way, the Journey performance with Arnell, and Arnell will tell you, was not one of their best moments. I remember some other commentators that have similar formats to what I do saying, I don't know what was going on with Arnell, but he had kind of a tough night. And I think he later admitted that the pressure was too much. He just couldn't live up to trying to fill the shoes of the voice. And one last reason Perry shows up, and he does this all the time, he does this to promote. He's done it for 30 plus years, and that is to tease the fans, to get the fans thinking about him again and wanting more of Steve Perry, even though Steve only, gives people little bits and pieces, and he's not putting out double albums or anything like that. Traces comes out, and running up to that release, I remember, because that's when this channel really got off the ground, the Perry people were like, okay, when's it coming? And gee, I heard a little snippet of it. And remember, I don't know if you remember that, the way he released it, there was like a little snippet of the song. And then like a day or two later, you got the whole song, and the place just went crazy for Noah Racing. And people were just psyched to have Steve Perry back. So he played that really well. And whoever was giving him advice, whether that was just his own instincts or somebody who he's close to, he did a really good job. They basically used Journey to springboard Steve Perry back into the limelight and get people interested in Steve Perry more than Journey, quite honestly. Journey didn't have an album coming out. Journey had been feuding. John Cane and Neil Schon had been feuding a bit, and Perry comes in there and he just, again, steals the show. Watching all of what transpired that night is really a treat. If you haven't watched the entire ceremony, it's rock and roll history. There's a lot of goodwill. On stage, there looks like there's, love and camaraderie. I don't know how deep that is with Steve Perry, but it certainly had the audience convinced, and good for Steve Perry, because I know from what I've heard, he was going to just bypass the entire ceremony, much like what Peter Cetera did to Chicago. It's a similar situation to some degree. It was a divorce, and it was not an amicable divorce. It was a lucrative divorce for Steve Perry, as he did quite well financially for many years. And even today, I think he'll probably still get a small portion of the proceeds if the band ever gets back on the road. All right, so that's my video. Why Steve Perry decided to attend the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony. And it's one we'll never forget.